Welcome to a Fuller Life podcast where we discuss longevity strategies, disease prevention, and improving quality of life. We explore the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social aspects of having the life you want. I'm Dr. Scott Fuller. On this podcast, we're going to be talking wellness strategies. So I'm going to break down different categories of things that you can work on, pay attention to, listen to, and start improving on. I consider myself a person that wants to, that's in for the long haul, now being 58 and wanting to, go another 40 years. That would be great. Who knows? Might end tomorrow, could end in 40 years or more. And now that I'm in for what I call the long haul, paying more and more attention to wellness strategies so I can have a great quality of life. And I would imagine if you're listening to this, this is something that interests you. So I'm going to break this down into 7 sections of wellness strategies, wellness techniques. And you might find that you're already good at 2 or 3 or 6 or maybe even 7 of them. And maybe a couple of the areas need more attention. Most of us need more attention in something, myself included. My hand is raised. I'm not pointing fingers here at all. In future podcasts, as you give me feedback, what I'm going to do is expand on these even more and do deep dives on these different subject matters and have guests on here that can help navigate our way and give us clues on what we should be doing to try to have that great quality of life, reduce the chance of having chronic disease, reduce the chance of chronic pain, or if we have those things, make them somewhat better if we can. As a medical caveat, do not do anything mentioned on this podcast or any other shows until you check with your doctor first. Don't make any changes in nutrition and exercise, and there's a clue of what we're going to be talking about here, or supplements and so forth, unless you check with your doctor, specifically if you are taking medications, and do not make any medication changes unless you're talking with your doctor. This show here, we are not forming any sort of doctor-patient relationship. The first subject, the first category is, of course, nutrition. The reason I put nutrition first, and you've heard me put exercise first in some prior shows, as I was talking specifically about Alzheimer's disease prevention. We put exercise first because the scientific data is showing us that exercise is the number one thing that you can do to strengthen your brain, keep the brain pathways strong, and make sure that your brain stays strong throughout your life, and to decrease the chances of you getting Alzheimer's dementia. Well, I'm going to flip-flop that for this section here and call nutrition number 1. And being a healthcare practitioner, chiropractor for 35 years, and having many thousands of patients that I've participated with, I find that the number one struggle, with a possible exception to that in a moment, of nutrition. And because strike one is we live in the United States, that's strike one, right? Why do I call it strike one? Because we have a processed food culture. It's all about convenience. It's all about added sugar and added bad fats and added salt and added fake taste enhancers and so forth in all the foods. And that's why I will often say in the grocery checkout line, you won't see bunches of broccoli and asparagus. What do you see on the checkout line? You know what you see. It's not real food. I also remind people that you cannot out-exercise your mouth, which means we try to do this all the time, where I'll just kind of eat what I want, and I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to work out, and I'm going to do cardio, and I'm going to stay fit, and I'm going to burn all the extra calories that I'm taking in and so forth. So you can't out-exercise your mouth. You've got to pay attention to both of those categories. By the way, number 2 is exercise. More on that in a minute. So we need to pay attention to our nutrition. Some people need an overhaul. And if you need a nutrition overhaul because you're just not doing well and you're not doing it on your own, then you're going to need some outside help, right? You might work with a nutritionist. There are nutritionists that become more and more readily available, many of them very effective. They might be actually covered by your insurance. They could be associated with your doctor's office. They could be associated with your hospital, with your clinic. Look around, ask around. Even medical insurances are starting to promote this more and more, where they're going to cover nutritionist activity and so forth. So just kind of do a little bit of homework, get some help, get somebody who's going to have you accountable to the changes that you're making. Why not do that? Work with a nutritionist, work with another healthcare practitioner that's going to help move the needle in the right direction. If you need some slight changes, here's what I recommend, and I've done shows on this here in the past. You can check out my YouTube page if you need some assistance. I've got a whole playlist on dozens of videos on making changes to your nutrition. But let me summarize it like this. The typical person that comes into me, I will tell them, go after a 10% change. A 10% change. Most people can make a 10% change in their life if they really pay attention to it. So not necessarily a complete overhaul, but if you do a 10% change, we can make a dent. Here's what that looks like. You would do 10% smaller dinner. Number one, 10% smaller dinner so you're not overfilling your tank before you go to bed, right? That's number one. Number two, 10% more vegetables at each meal, including breakfast. Okay, that's number one. Number two in my little recommendation here. Well, what do you do for vegetables at breakfast? Just eat vegetables. You can do what I do. I literally grab a handful of greens. I try to do that at each breakfast. Doesn't happen all the time, but I try to do that there. Maybe if you're going to make a scrambled egg, just load it in with vegetables as an example. But I just try to grab a handful of leafy greens, or I'm cutting up some carrots, so I eat some carrots or celery or whatever it is. I just keep that stream of vegetables coming into my body, right? That's just a good way to do it. At each meal, 10% increase in vegetables. And the third one, and this is hard and extremely important and very valuable, no snacking after dinner before bed. It's such a difficult thing to do for a lot of people. I've mentioned this to hundreds, never mind the thousands on the show here. No snacking after dinner. If we do those three things, 10% smaller dinner, 10% more vegetables at each meal, no snacking after dinner, you're probably going to move the needle in the right direction. I've seen it with many of my patients. If you read any good book or listen to a great podcast, mine, somebody else's, whatever it is, it could be Peter Attia, Rich Roll, Rhonda Patrick, Andrew Huberman. There's many of them, right? And you just listen to them and get some nutrition advice and start to make some changes, you're going to do well. Any good book is going to do that. One popular one is called Blue Zones, right? So I read the book many years ago, talked about it on the show many, many times, and now there's, I think it's a Netflix series now called Blue Zones. Yep. And so a lot of people have been asking me about Blue Zones in the past year since the Netflix series has been out there. And then I'll give them a reflection. I'll say, give me a summary of the nutrition that the Blue Zones people follow. And by the way, if you are not familiar with this, Blue Zones means zones or collections of people around the world that live to 100 years old. Not exist to 100 years old, but they're functional at 100 years old. Their bodies are working, their brains are working, they're sharp, they're integrated, they're often living on their own, and so forth, okay? There are concentrations of these people on Okinawa, Costa Rica, Sicily, one of the Greek islands, another place in the Mediterranean, and actually there is a group in the United States, believe it or not. The Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Lima, California. Of course, they kind of live off the grid, not the American lifestyle. But anyway, so higher concentrations of people that live well to 100. What's their dietary staple? It's 90 to 100% plant-based. Now, I make that comment not because you all need to be vegetarians. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying that's the direction you need to lean toward, because people around the world for millennia are showing us that that's kind of the route to go. And I know there's other people that are going to say, well, it's a paleo diet because if you look ancestrally, whatever. So let's talk about in the past several centuries, the people that are living well to 100 have mainly a plant-based diet. And guess how many people come to me and say, Dr. Fuller, I am addicted to lots of locally grown organic vegetables, and I eat them at every meal, and they're thoughtfully prepared, and I just can't seem to stop doing that, right? It just doesn't happen. So I think it's a good general thing just to go back to that 10% little needle mover that I said of eating more vegetables, right? Blue Zones. So check that out. You can check out the book. You can check out the Netflix series and so forth. And this is something very recent. I wanted to tell you about this one. This is a podcast I'm just finishing up right now. So the podcaster is Rich Roll. You've heard me talk about him. Very popular podcaster, easy to find, unbelievable interviewer. He's very, very good, very thoughtful, and he has excellent guests. The guest he has on in this podcast, which is August of 2024, is Dr. Ted Schaefer. And he is a urologist. So they do a deep dive on men's health regarding prostate health. Early on in the podcast, and I'm so happy Rich Roll asked the question. He asked the question of Dr. Schaefer, what about prevention? What can we do for prevention? Now, Dr. Ted Schaefer, medical physician, he said right off the bat, he said, oh yeah, absolutely. Lifestyle plays a big role in prostate health, big role. And here's what he said. If you compare the men in East Asia, let's say China, Japan, and so forth, right? And you compare their prostate health, and you compare it to United States and Europe, they're not even in the same zip code. The men of East Asia have very low incidences of prostate problems and prostate cancer. And of course, in the United States and Europe, but particularly the United States, very high problem of having prostate issues. Follow? Okay. And then he said, well, why is that? He said, first thing you look at is their diet. You just look at their diet. What about the diet of men in East Asia is different than ours? First of all, they eat a lot of plants. This is him. This is Dr. Ted Schaefer. This is not me. They eat a lot of plants. So, sidebar, they're not eating a lot of processed foods. And the other thing he said is they just don't eat a lot. It's a peasant diet. You follow? So that is, again, and I've done many shows on cancer prevention, and most cancers are preventable, not all, but most. And it's mostly lifestyle driven. And here's another doctor saying just specifically for prostate, oh yeah, if you do the lifestyle thing, you're going to significantly decrease your chance of prostate problems, prostate enlargements, and prostate cancer. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That's just giving us a little added juice to try to go after these, quote, lifestyle things and improve our nutrition for all kinds of prevention. And you've heard me do deep dives on Alzheimer, disease prevention, protecting your brain health, keeping your brain strong so you can stay mentally, emotionally, cognitively sharp throughout your life. And one of the top two things you can do is eat the cleanest diet that you can tolerate. That's another statement that I make. People ask me, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? And I tell them, eat the cleanest diet that you can enjoy. If you can enjoy a cleaner diet than you're eating now, you're doing good, because that means you're going to stick with it, right? Anybody can starve themselves for a week and eat grapefruit and drink water, right? It's just not sustainable. I remember 40 years ago, my mom did the grapefruit diet. Yeah, and she lasted 10 days or whatever it was, right? So we have to do things that are sustainable, and hopefully you get some gems out of what I just mentioned. Number 2, exercise. Exercise of any sort. We need strength training. We need cardio. It's well established across the board. I think everybody accepts that. Back to blue zones. What do blue zones people do? They're exercising, but blue zones people don't go to the gym. Nature is their gym. And I'll think of the book in a moment. I'll think of the book. It is, I wasn't going to talk about this one. Yeah, Born to Run. It's Christopher McDougall. But it's not Born to Run. That's right, Natural Born Heroes. A book by Christopher McDougall. He did Born to Run and Born to Run 2, great books on their own, but Natural Born Heroes was just an awesome book. It's more about history. The history of Crete in World War II and the resistance that they put up to the German invasion. And then how the people survived. And they survived through nature and being strong and running through mountains and so on and so forth. Very fascinating book. But anyway, so back to the Blue Zones people. Nature is their workout. So they'll walk 4 miles to the market and carry their groceries home. And then they'll fix their own houses and they'll garden their own gardens, and they have hobbies and they're using their hands and they have a great social network. And so there's a lot of movement and a lot of strength. Sure, we might go for a 2-mile walk, but they go for a 2-mile walk carrying heavy bags of groceries or whatever it is, if they're not growing it on their own in the backyard and so on and so forth, right? So what about exercise frequency? Do we go to the gym 3 days a week and do it? And my recommendation is this, and I've said this many times. You do not need to exercise every day. You just need to exercise on the days that you eat. Just exercise on the days that you eat, right? So if you're fasting one day, you get the day off. Okay. Back to the Alzheimer's disease prevention strategies. The science is clear. Strength training is what you need. Now, a lot of older folks are walking and bring it on. A lot of older folks are playing pickleball. That's the hot new thing. That's great. But we need strength training. As a matter of fact, just some folks here in the studio, we were talking about strength training just before we started the show here. We talked about the importance of that, adding strength training. For people that are older and maybe not a full function, they have to get creative on the type of strength training that they can do, and maybe they need consultation with that. Maybe they need an exercise person or trainer that actually focuses with older people with limitations. And there are many talented physical therapists, chiropractors, trainers, and so forth that you can engage in, OTs and so forth that can develop programs that people can do. And I've talked about this in other shows, and this is so important. I'm going to park on this for just a moment. I'm going to park on this. I talked about a couple of men that came into my office, first-time chiropractor, first time with me. They're in their 90s, and they're walking in with walkers. So their bodies have deteriorated to a point where they need a walker to get around for safety, for balance, and because they're all slouched over. Can you get the picture? So they're all bent and slouched over. You've seen it too many times. They're walking with walkers, and they can't even hold themselves up, right? Well, what are we going to do with them for weight training? Okay, so I thought about it, and here's what we did. Just as a basic. So we want to work more back-sided muscles on the backside of our body to pull us upright, and maybe not as much of the front muscles that are pushing muscles. So we want to do a little bit more pull, a little bit less push. If you think about it, push muscles like chest and bicep have the propensity to bend us forward a little bit more, where if we're working back-sided muscles like back muscles and tricep muscles, they're in the backside of our body, and that's going to have the chance of pulling us more upright, particularly if we're concentrating on our posture while we're doing the different maneuvers. Okay, so I had these men sitting in a chair. They would have a band or two in front of them, either held by somebody or wrapped strongly around a doorknob or a hook or whatever it might be, strong piece of furniture. And they're doing lat rows. They're doing lat rows with bands, and they were doing it right there in my office with me. And if their significant other or one of their children are with them and they can do that with them, they're holding out in front. I am constantly on each repetition cueing that person to pull up as tall as they possibly can, which might not be very good, but it's certainly better than they're doing. They pull up tall, and then they do a rep, and the reps are slow, deliberate, and concentrated, okay? And we have watched these two men in particular, their postures improve. One man moved from, pay attention now, moved from a walker to a cane. That oftentimes doesn't happen, right? When you're in a walker, you're kind of stuck with the walker. But his balance improved and his posture improved. We went from a walker to a cane. That's progress. He also went from super grumpy because he was in pain and super uncomfortable, and that will definitely chip down in your mood, right? And he moved up to smiling at me and say, "Good morning, Dr. Fuller," when he would come into the office, instead of just looking at me with a frown and not even saying anything. Literally, that's how it was in the beginning. And then he's turned that around. So as his body came up more upright, his mood came more upright. As his body came more upright, he had less pain in his neck and back. So he had less pain, and so he was happier. So we changed his mood, we changed his brain, we changed his structure. Is he going to be perfect? No, but is he going to be better than when he walked in the door first with the walker? Yep. That's the kind of thing that we can do. If you want more information, I'll talk about this. You can look at Peter Attia's work, podcasting, YouTube videos, books. Andrew Huberman, Rhonda Patrick, Jeff Cavalier with Athlean X. The list is endless on who you can follow if you're up to doing it on your own or getting consultation like I talked about. Remember to talk to your medical physician first. Okay, next. Sleep. Sleep is critical, so important. I'm happy to see so many of these podcasters and scientists and doctors paying more attention to sleep, quality sleep, good sleep, sleep environments, and so forth. On this show in the past, I talked about Matthew Walker. He has the book Why We Sleep, great book. He made the rounds on all of these podcasters that I talked about earlier. I think he's been on, I don't remember who he's been on exactly, but it was probably Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, Roger Patrick, and so forth. So look at all those people. Rich Roll, I think he's been on Rich Roll as well. Look at all those podcasts, and you can do a deep dive. Plus my videos. I have at least 3 videos on improving quality sleep. And I give people a long list of things that you can try at home. And some of them are very, very simple, such as make the room darker. Don't drink water an hour or 2 before you go to bed. Shut off caffeine, only caffeine in the morning, not for the rest of the day. Even though you think it's not affecting you, it very likely could be. Unless you're a mutant and you have more cytochrome P450 oxidase enzyme in your liver that breaks down caffeine, but those are mutants. Those aren't the typical people. So no caffeine after breakfast, and so on and so on. Don't eat big meals and go to bed. Try to have 3 hours. Well, then it gets more difficult. This is more difficult. Not snacking before bed, because then you get an insulin dump, and then if you get an insulin dump, it's going to wake you up more because the brain thinks it's waking up. Okay, that's another reason not to snack before dinner, because it interferes with quality of sleep. So that's a little harder for people. Eating a smaller dinner that's away from bedtime. If you go to bed at 10, you should be finishing eating at 7 with nothing else to eat between 7 and 10 as best you possibly can. If you can't do it that long, then at least make it 2 hours. You know, the more time that you have from the last time that you eat to the time that you go to bed is going to be better for quality sleep, and so on and so on. You might think that the TV relaxes you before you go to bed, so you watch TV in bed. Nope. Not the thing to do. That's a little bit tougher for people. Keep the electronics out of the bedroom. And the list goes on and on of things that you can do. Some of them easy, some of them more difficult, but I've had people do really well. And sometimes there's supplements that can happen. I've talked about magnesium a lot. Magnesium is a brain supplement. Magnesium as a restless leg decreaser, muscle cramp decreaser, and a pain reducer. But magnesium can help some people sleep better. So there can be some things that are simple that can help you do that. So that's the sleep angle, and that's number 3 on our list. Okay, number 4, taking care of your spine health and wellness. I'm a chiropractor, so I take care of people's spines. Been doing it for 35 years. I take care of my spine. I've got quite a spine story. Mine is not as severe and significant as a lot of people, but my dad had a terrible back. Helped by a chiropractor, he went for the rest of his life. My mom suffered with back pain and sciatica when she was working retail and on her feet in high heel shoes for years and years. She was helped by a chiropractor. She went for the rest of her life. Both my older brothers had terrible back episodes. One older brother still has them, but much more rarely now. I've never had a significant back episode like that, but my back bothers me when I sit for an hour. So I'll be sitting doing this podcast, and it will probably toward the end get a little bit achy, but I've been like that for 40 years. So I manage my back really well. It's just like managing our teeth. All of us need to manage our teeth. We are on good maintenance schedules. Hopefully we avoid disaster with our teeth with a good maintenance program, right? So we need to do that with our spines. That's what I talk about all day long in my office. I have tons of videos. I've got my book, Happy Back, that gives you all kinds of suggestions on ergonomic day-to-day activity changes, plus exercises, plus posture, plus sitting management. I've got videos on that. You can read all about it. And if you want to talk about success stories with people with acute and especially chronic problems, go to my website, drscottfuller.com. Read the testimonials there. People write testimonials online about the office and how bad they were, and we turn that around with appropriate care in office, with home exercises and stretches, with ergonomic changes, with taking care of sitting issues, and so forth. Got to take care of your spine. Low back pain is one, if not the top complaint that any person calls a doctor, a chiropractor, a therapist, anyone. It's one of, if not the top cause of long-term disability on the planet, back pain. Neck pain is pretty close to that as well. Low back pain. That's why it's so important. It's the number 1 reason I get a phone call in my office, back pain. Number 2 is neck pain. Number 3 is headaches and migraines. We tend to be good at those 3 things. And by the way, just as a side note, a lot of people just don't know this. Some chiropractors, myself included, take care of other joints in the body. Myself having shoulder issues, I take care of shoulders and elbows and carpal tunnel. We do plantar fasciitis and knee problems and hip. So again, some chiropractors do that, some don't. We oftentimes do it in conjunction with physical therapy because there are things that we do that they don't, and vice versa. Massage therapy can help that. Acupuncture, all of these things can help all the joints in your body, but also the neck and back in particular. So you really need to address these things and take care of them. I talked about those couple of patients earlier that were bent over in walkers. Well, they didn't typically, unless it was a significant injury or fracture or other problem, they didn't get there overnight. It took decades to get there, right? If we have significant teeth issues, they usually didn't happen overnight unless there was a trauma or a problem. It took years, decades to get there, right? So we want to turn that ship around. It's never too early and it's never too late to start paying attention to your spine and starting to pay attention to these other strategies: nutrition, exercise, sleep, spine. Dr. Ted Schaefer, that I mentioned earlier, the urologist, on his show, he made a very good comment. He said, when somebody asks him, hey, well, I'm really motivated now, when somebody comes to them and now they have a prostate problem, they'll say, what about prevention? What can I do at home? I'll do anything on the wellness strategies, lifestyle changes, and so forth. And Dr. Ted Schaefer would say something along the lines of, well, 30 years ago, you should have been doing blank, right? Kind of funny, kind of very serious. But of course, he also says, well, start right now, clean up everything you can in your lifestyle to make the moving forward better, right? So it's never too early and never too late to starting to work on all of these wellness strategies, including your spine. And then, of course, something we do in the office, if people want to do this, just like when you go to the dentist for checkups for the rest of your life, or you bring your car to the mechanic, even though the car's running awesome, you want it to keep it running that way. We also, after we deal with the acute or chronic problem, we will have people come in for infrequent maintenance care, like an oil change and so forth. Okay? That's the spine. Number 5, stress. When I say stress, I'm talking more about chronic stress. And we're going to do more deep dives in this as we move forward. And I hope to have some really quality guests on here that are going to give us more tools and techniques to handle this. And I'm talking more about the chronic stuff, the chronic drip stress that really gets us, like Simon Sinek says. So if you're in an acute scenario and you need help, go get help. Do not hesitate. Make the phone call and get some help immediately. If you have a chronic stress problem and something is getting you, whether it's the work thing, the family thing, the relationship thing, the memories thing, whatever it might be, maybe you need professional assistance. But I can tell you, I've done a deep dive on this for 35 years. And I'm still working on it, and I want to share with you just some of the books. Now, again, there are resources, websites, YouTube videos, podcasts, all kinds of things. I just want to share a few books recently, and I've read many dozens. I've lost count, but here's a few that I found really interesting recently. One is called The Tools by Barry Michaels and Phil Stutz. And by the way, Phil Stutz had a great podcast with Rich Roll in 2024. Check that one out. It's very well done. So that's a great book called The Tools. Well, as somebody that wants to organize their life, one is called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Buy Back Your Time. Here's another one, The Inner Work. The Inner Work. The authors are Micheletti and Cottrell. Sorry if I'm pronouncing those names incorrectly. The Inner Work. Let me go back here. Of course, many of you know the book Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert Sapolsky. Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Took me a long time to finally get to that book, and boy, I'm glad I did. The Expectation Effect by David Robson. Actually, Peter Attia wrote the book Outlive, which is more about the wellness strategies that we're talking about today. But he had a really powerful chapter on his life's journey and how he had these chronic stress issues that needed to be visited and what he did to turn his life around from a mental and emotional standpoint. Great chapter in his book about that. Here's another one called The Miracle Morning The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. That's another good one. The book Chatter by Ethan Kross, Kross. And then there was another one here. Actually, that was a great book too. The Code of the Extraordinary Mind by Vishen. So the Code of the Extraordinary Mind, Vishen Laihani. Another great book as well. So I have many videos that I've done on dealing with chronic stress issues with different tools, techniques, resources, and so forth. So I think it's the thing that we need to talk about more, and I just see it in my office so much. I see people under chronic stress not able to change their nutrition. People under chronic stress are not getting the exercise that they desperately need, which can actually help reduce chronic stress. People with chronic stress not getting the sleep that they need. People with chronic stress getting more chronic pain from chronic stress, and so on. It's just something that really needs to be visited. Hopefully something in there you'll go and dig into, get some ideas and techniques. And by the way, one of my favorite chronic stress pattern interrupters is Tony Robbins. I think he has an amazing gifts and tools, and a lot of his stuff is free. You can just go to YouTube and start digging in. If his material resonates with you, he is a human emotional change agent expert. I just made that up. I think it's good. Tony Robbins, great stuff. Very, very solid stuff. Next is supplements. Again, check with your doctor before you start taking supplements, particularly if you're taking medications and if you have chronic disease issues, just to make sure things are appropriate for where you are. I like what Robert Lustig said. Robert Lustig says, I'm not into all these supplements that people are taking. I think supplements should be taken for deficiencies. Then he was asked, well, what supplements do you take, Dr. Lustig? And he said, I take omega-3 fish oil, vitamin D, and vitamin C. If I remember correctly, those are the three that he takes. Fish oil, he might be taking 3,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA combined per day, which is my recommendation. It could be 1,000, I don't remember. He takes vitamin D, appropriate level, let's say it's 5,000. 5,000 international units per day is what we recommend for most adults, year-round, by the way, year-round. And you can get your levels tested. We recommend you know your vitamin D level. Most doctors are testing it on a regular basis. And you should be somewhere around 30 to 60, 40 to 70, depending on who you read. 30 to 60 is good. Most people need 5,000 IU per day, year-round, to keep it at that level. And he takes vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams per day. That one, some people say you need, some people you don't. You could take some other supplements like B-complex. Again, people are not eating a well-rounded diet with lots of vegetables to get these nutrients. Magnesium I mentioned earlier. Magnesium has just done really wonderful things for my patient base in the past 7 years, from muscle cramps and restless leg syndrome to improved sleep, to better brain, and even a couple of people with minor heart arrhythmias found a correction with magnesium. Again, check with your doctor first. Zinc I've talked about as well as another one. Don't take too much. Take a mild amount. So there are some supplements that can do exactly that. They supplement a good nutritional program and kind of filling in the blanks. But also do your homework. Just because something was on sale at the store might not mean that it's good for you. And I've gone through this with countless patients where we look at a supplement and I point out these ingredients that you just don't want in your body because it was cheap, and we move them to a better quality supplement with better deals. Okay. And last is I call this a miscellaneous category. Miscellaneous things that are making the rounds and hot topics. It can be something like low-level laser therapy. And I have lasers in my office. I've been using them for 19 years. I have videos on them. You can check those out. And I use a low enough level laser, meaning low power, meaning 5 to 7.5 milliwatts. And it is laser. It's not LED. It is laser, and there is a difference. And I've used it on the brain and seen amazing things, including concussion coming around. Check out laser. I use it on all joints of the body except for the eye. I use it everywhere in the body. Seen some really good miracles with that. I have a magnetic therapy table in my office that I use for almost the whole body, but we also use it for pelvic floor rehabilitation, for urinary incontinence and fecal incontinence. So, a couple of websites, pelvicwave.com to look at it for the pelvic floor. And there's simple information on there to do that, to look at. And because I have the table version, not the chair, it's reactinnovations.com. I have this on my YouTube videos, easy to find. The websites are easy to find and so forth. React Innovations, pelvic wave. Cold therapy, cold plunges and so forth. Is there merit to this? It looks pretty strong. You can look at Wim Hof. You can look at Rhonda Patrick's information on that. Andrew Huberman talks about it. Rich Roll talks about it. The list goes on. So look at cold therapy. Might not be something for you. Maybe you have conditions that are inappropriate for that. You have to check into that. And also on the opposite side, like infrared saunas works for some people. Deep breathing exercises. Meditation and mindfulness would fall in here, but that also falls on the chronic stress environment. Meditation, mindfulness, yoga. It could be things that you do 3 minutes or 5 minutes a day or 45 minutes a day. You can employ in that. There are many, many others. I just don't have time to explain them here. We might do deep dives in more of the miscellaneous stuff as time goes along. But those are 7 wellness strategies that you can look into to try to move the needle, improve your health, reduce the chance of chronic disease, and certainly reduce your pain. I'm Dr. Scott Fuller. Thank you. Thank you for listening to A Fuller Life podcast. For a video of this podcast, go to my YouTube channel, Dr. Scott Fuller, which has a lot of additional content.